All right, week in review for the Enlightenment. So it's not really a week, it's kind of like a week and a half. It's a bunch of few days here. But hopefully this is a little 10, 12-minute video that will help you review stuff related to the Enlightenment that you need to remember. All right, so a couple of things first off. We all know that Enlightenment means looking at things in a new way. It's going to start with the scientific revolution and spread into society and how people look at other people, how people interact, and all that kind of stuff. So why does this happen in France? We went through this 3 or 4 times. You got to remember the French language. Cardinal Richelieu worked for Louis XIII, and they started to create a French language that was common amongst all the people. That becomes the language of the educated, replacing Latin. We also talked about Louis XIV and Louis XV, not so much Louis XV yet, but the world of Louis XIV and why that's what you would want to change. All right. And then there's also the fact that guys like Voltaire and other people, they're persecuted for their beliefs, but they're not killed for their beliefs. Obviously, if they're killed for their beliefs, they can no longer spread them. But this persecution makes it so the people want to follow them. They're like, why are they being harassed? What is it about what they're saying? Maybe we should follow them. All right. So the whole thing begins with the scientific revolution. Remember, natural philosophy is what they called science, the natural word and just some ideas about it. Then we've done this a whole bunch of times. We've at least twice reviewed it before: heliocentric versus geocentric, Copernicus versus Aristotle and Ptolemy. This book right here on the revolution to heavenly spheres is a big deal. It changes history. Remember, the Catholic Church was not happy about this, but they weren't really too angered by the future guys like the Keplers and the Bras and all this kind of stuff, because they figured eventually they'd be proven right. The Lutherans and those kind of people were more opposed to the scientific revolution at first, more so than the Catholics. That all changes for the Catholics when Galileo here comes up with this book. All right, this is the book that will change everything and officially prove or support Copernicus's idea that the Earth is no longer the center of the universe, or in actuality never was the center of the universe. It was always the sun. So we looked at these science guys. The new thing was Newton. All right, so this is a bunch of Copernicus stuff. The new thing was Newton and his book right here, Principia. This is the book that synthesizes this word right here. It makes everything that Kepler, Brahe, Copernicus, Galileo, and anybody else worked on, it puts it all together, makes it all doable. All right, I put number 1 up here because remember, this is the first of the 4 big books to remember, the revolutionary ideas to come out of the scientific and Enlightenment eras. There's dozens of them, hundreds of them. We're just going to narrow it down to the big 4. All right, so Newton puts it all together. So more Newton stuff. We kind of ran through this. Some of it might be in your packet. Some of it might not be. We ran through this stuff a couple of times. Number 3 is the interesting one. Basically, it's promoting the sciences because it's going to help with the economics. So you could put economics over here. All right, being able to ship our goods from the new world. We need better scientists to do that, better ways of doing it, so you guys go figure that out. That goes right along with sailing technology. And then 2 is pretty simple. We've talked about that a lot. And number 1, just remember there were universities. There were universities. How big they were, how powerful they are, that's questionable. Definitely promoting religious ideas. It's not like there weren't places to learn before the scientific revolution began. All right, and then you got Bacon and Descartes. You got the science and the experimental method. You got the math behind it. That would be Descartes. You got the observation and do the lab. That would be Bacon. You combine it together, scientific method. So that's a quick little 4 minutes on that. Which takes us then, we already looked at this before. Okay, women. All right, there were some women scientists, Cavendish and Kunitz. They're going to work alongside their husbands. We talked about that with the Enlightenment. You would think equality, but not really. There are some advances here. If you're working with your husband, that's a good thing. Women are receiving more of an education. We talked about that. That's a good thing. Broader education, better education, that's a good thing. But when it really comes to equality, Even the enlightened thinkers are more into do your home stuff. Don't worry about being out in the public world. Okay, so all this scientific method is going to help inspire the Enlightenment. All right, the new world here inspires the Enlightenment. And we looked at guys like Hobbes and Locke. All right, this was the cover of Leviathan. This was a discussion we had one day comparing Hobbes and Locke. This would be Hobbes. This would be people are selfish. This would be the monarch is still needs to run the country strongly. Remember, he's a after the English Civil War guy. So of course he believes in a strong monarchy because he just lived through the Civil War. Now on the other hand, Locke, and up on the top here, his two treaties of government, he's going to be after the Glorious Revolution, where they peacefully transitioned from a monarch to a different monarch. Remember, they all like monarchs, but to a different monarch, a better monarch, a monarch that works for the people, not telling the people what to do. Okay, so this is early 1600s Enlightenment. The 1700s Enlightenment is going to be the new stuff. Okay, the Voltaires and Diderots. These are the three most important general concepts. Number one, this should be number two. Number three is just the idea of social science, or taking the scientific method and applying it to people, to society. Okay, so running through a few of these guys, Bernard de Fontenelle, remember he's a popularizer. He probably wrote some new stuff, some creative stuff, some stuff for the encyclopedia, but stuff we're not going to worry about. We're going to remember him as a popularizer, right here, right in the middle, popularizer. Those words again, remember those words. Okay, Bayle. Number two. Okay, the idea of reason and question and think. He's a skeptic, but more we can just call him, a use reason kind of guy. Don't accept things at face value. Then we get into other guys. You got Montesquieu on the left, you got Voltaire on the right. Montesquieu, baron, so he's a noble, but he still is going to push for three branches of government. That would be spirit of the laws. All right, three branches of government. It's new, it's radical, it's an enlightened way to look at politics. And then there's Voltaire, very interesting, cool story, beaten up, arrested, all that kind of stuff. You could find 4, 5, 10, 20 different things that he wrote that would be interesting to remember. I really didn't have you remember any. I just want you to know him as kind of the voice of the Enlightenment, a mass producer. Tons of information, tons of cool quotes. He's kind of the voice of the Enlightenment because he did so much. All right, and then we had salons. This is actually a coffee house. We talked about how the Enlightenment spreads. We talked about public spheres. These men, not women. Men are out and about, coffee house. They got the newspapers on the table. They're talking, they're mingling. They're talking about Montesquieu. They're talking about Voltaire. They're talking about the ideas. What kind of changes can we make to our monarchy? Remember, keep the monarchy. And then there's salons. So the interesting thing about all this information is that it is spread. It's discussed, it's spread. Masonic temples, salons in people's homes, coffee houses, you name it. The Solionaires over here on the right, they are the hostesses that are in charge of bringing in the best and brightest thinkers of the era. All right, you got some stuff here. You got the Rococo art. You got the Solionaire on the left, more Rococo art. All right. And then we talked about the Freemasons briefly. They are also spreading knowledge. The difference with them is they're a more private organization. They're spreading it only amongst themselves. We talked about books and the increase in books and the change in way people read. Instead of dad reading to the family, it's more personal, it's more private. Remember, craft books, science books become more popular. Religious books decline. This is something that these people opposed greatly that I haven't talked about yet by the time I've made this video, but I've got to stress that. They're anti-superstition. They're anti-dogma. They believe in deism. the idea that God is a watchmaker God and not there every second of your life. Adam Smith was also a radical liberal idea. Adam Smith was the capitalism guy. Adam Smith was the idea of free market. Invisible hand, which means supply and demand. It's very liberal. All these guys are liberal. Now, Adam Smith's ideas of capitalism are conservative today. So I've said this 4, 5, 6 different times. Classic liberalism is today's conservatism. So you should remember Adam Smith. You will definitely have Adam Smith questions on your test. This was the radical part of the Enlightenment. Now, the encyclopedia here is still not later. This is the pinnacle of what all these people were trying to do, this mass accumulation of knowledge. This is an important aspect of what the Enlightenment was all about. So then we get into later Enlightenment guys. And remember them, they are radical. They are atheist versus deist. What's the guy's name? Actually advocates for democracy, which is considered crazy at the time. The Social Contract here by Rousseau is the general will. This is close to democracy. It's on the way to democracy. Let the people decide. The difference between like a Hobbes and a Rousseau is pretty drastic. But remember, Hobbes is not advocating for the government to be overthrown. Locke didn't really even believe the government should be overthrown as easily as Rousseau would. Locke would let the government be overthrown if they weren't, following the deal. But this guy says, you got to do what the public wants. Let the public decide. General will and Rousseau go hand in hand. You got to remember that phrase with that name. Okay, so they're getting radical. They're getting more extreme. Okay, and this is something about women. We talked about women. I don't think I actually showed you the slide. Now that I look at it, I'll give you a couple seconds to read it. It's not great for women. There's improvement for women, but life could be better. We talked about that in class. All right, and then this was our final topic, the despots. If you have questions on any of these people, you can watch the other video that I will also share with you. Here's some of the basic principles. Remember, this is the background, I should say, not really the principles. The background is going to be education and crime, or not crime, but reducing the torture, making law codes fair. So this is the one that's not in the video. Remember, Catherine the Great wants to continue the westernizing, this domestic reform. She does do ending torture, ending the death penalty. She does reform society. But when this Pugachev guy pretends to be her dead husband and comes back and takes over, and he gets all these peasant people to follow him, that's when she says, forget it, we're not doing that. We're not going to give everybody equal rights. That doesn't work for me. And then the big thing with her was her land gain, the partition of Poland. Remember, Poland disappears from the map. So this is her biggest accomplishment. She gets to where Peter the Great and Ivan the Terrible, all those places those guys couldn't get, she gets to. More land to the west and to the north with Poland, but she also gets south towards the Black Sea. So another big topic is enlightened despots and what they believed in. So this was just a little Wikipedia definition of it, but it does a good job of explaining what they believed in and what they wanted. All right, the highlighted, everything for the people, nothing by the people. All right, so that's that stuff in review. Hope this helps.